weeks ago, I got invited out to lunch by the manager of the bank that we bank with at the church. He wanted to take me out. And so we went out, had a really nice spread of food here. I'm sitting across the table. We're having a great conversation. I reach for my soda and I take a sip, and things got really quiet all of a sudden. He says, I think that's my drink that you just drank from. And I look down, I'm like, oh, that did taste kind of weird. Oh, so awkward. It's like, man, I like you, we're friends, but I don't like you that much, right? We are not at saliva sharing levels of friendship. So we'll just put that Diet Coke off to the side. You ever made that mistake? Have you ever eaten the wrong thing only to realize later, whoops, that was someone else's? Like you come home from school and there's one slice of chocolate cake left on the counter. And you're like, oh, it's a divine appointment. And you go and you eat that cake. And right as you finish clearing off the plate, mom comes back from work. She's like, but did you just eat my last? That was my Mother's Day cake. You bought it for it, right? And then you feel bad. Or you're digging through the fridge and you see a half bottle of apple juice left in the very back. And you're like, ooh, apple juice. I like apple juice. And you drink it not realizing that Dad had saved half of the apple juice to soak this pulled pork that he was going to smoke. And he knew that kids like apple juice, so he put it in the very back of the fridge. And he pushed like pickles and vegetables in front of it so none of his 4 kids would find it. Because once he goes to put the pulled pork in at midnight, it's too late to go to Aldi and buy another thing of apple juice. It's oddly specific. It's almost like that happened before. Okay. Maybe. I've gotten good at hiding apple juice. It's awkward, right? You feel bad. If it's your little brother's last Pop-Tart, you don't feel so bad, right? But if it was mom's chocolate cake, you're like, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to eat your stuff. I did not intend to. I felt bad when I drank the banker's Diet Coke. He took me out to lunch. He bought all of the food. He bought me my own drink. I didn't drink my drink. I drank his drink by mistake. And today I want to talk about that moment, that same feeling that happens to us on a spiritual level with God's stuff. Because I don't want to take his stuff. I don't want to use his stuff that's supposed to be for him when he's already given me so much. So we want to talk about that today. And let me give 2 disclaimers, because some of you guys from your church background or from your unchurched background, you have got a very fair but inaccurate view of how churches deal with money. Oh my goodness, we're talking about money today. Where's the exit? Cover for me. Run. Okay? We don't talk about money all the time, but Jesus talked about it a lot because it's important. It really gets to the core of what's important to us. And so I want to talk about that today. 2 disclaimers. Number 1, I don't work on commission. I don't make anything more based on if you give to the Lord or not. The board sets my salary. They're very generous. But nothing that we do here is so that I can get a personal jet. That would be cool. I don't think I need that. The other disclaimer is I know for many of you, when churches have talked about money, it's been one of 2 extremes. It's either this huge guilt trip that puts a giant burden around your neck, or it's if you just sow, it's like an investment strategy. It's like a Ponzi scheme of church. If you give $200 seed money into my ministry, your 401k will triple. Okay, this is not any of that. I want to look and see, what did God say in the Bible about what stuff is his and what stuff is mine, and how can I respond to that? So let's dig in today. If you have fill-in-the-blank notes, you can write this down. If you're watching from home, we're testing out a cool new thing on the YouVersion Bible app. So if you're following along on the Bible app, it'll be there too. Write this down. The first cut of every harvest belongs to God. The first segment, the first portion of every harvest in life, it belongs to God. Now, this is a good time to zoom out a little bit and remind ourselves that really everything belongs to him. Ultimately, he made all of the stuff. No matter how cool of a spaceship I build with the Legos, he owns the whole Lego box. He owns the table that I built it on, right? He owns everything. The Bible says this in Psalm 24:1, that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. It's all his. The world and all its people belong to him. So ultimately, before we talk about anything that's God's portion, we have to understand He owns everything, which means at the base level, you and I, we are not really owners, we're managers. Now, we are important managers. We're highly honored managers. The owner has entrusted us with the whole planet, which sometimes we do a good job with, and sometimes we don't do a very good job with. We're trying to do better, okay? But he's entrusted us with a lot. And he said, when you manage, the first portion of everything that you bring in, I want to be dedicated back to me. He said it this way, Exodus 34, verse 19, and then we'll read on a little bit to verse 26. He said, the firstborn of every animal belongs to me. As you harvest your crops, bring the very best of the first harvest to the house of the Lord your God. Now, here's a good time to say this too. I know some people, they get caught up with this because they say, well, that's the Old Testament law. And didn't Jesus come to get rid of the Old Testament law so we don't have to follow that anymore? Well, Jesus said, I came to complete it, to fulfill it. And the idea of giving the first portion back to God actually goes back before the law was written. God clarified it in the law. Jesus continued to affirm putting God first in your finances after he completed this work. It's a dynamic that's important. God said the first cut belongs to me. And then in Leviticus, he goes on to sort of specify, well, how much is that first cut? In Leviticus 27:10, he said 1/10 of the produce of the land, whether grain from the fields or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord and must be set apart for him as holy. So the first portion, the first cut of everything that we do, it belongs to him. I have some guys that are going to help me with an illustration to make this easier. So you guys come on up to the stage here. All right. And as they come, here, fill this in your notes. We say tithe. That's a church term. No one says tithe outside of church. Okay. Tithe is just a word that means tenth. It means 10%. It means the first piece. Right back there. Go ahead and start bringing that out, guys. And God says to us, the first portion, the tithe, the first 10% of what you make, that's something that I want you to set apart as special for me, for my purposes. So I'm going to ask these guys to bring this stuff out. Go ahead and bring that first crate out. And you can just keep that coming, I think. I'll stall a little bit. While they're doing that, I want to take a minute to give credit to Pastor Rob Ketterling, one of our premier churches in America, for permission to use this illustration. I completely borrowed this from him, but he said I could. So thank you, Pastor Rob. I want you to imagine, I have two tables here, okay? This table is God's stuff, or my stuff, I'm sorry. This is my stuff, okay? And this table represents God's stuff. Kate, I'm going to keep you on your toes today on the live stream camera, all right? And it's a simple dynamic. When you harvest bell peppers, any bell pepper fans? Anybody? I love bell peppers. I'm the main bell pepper consumer in my family, right? If I harvest bell peppers, it means 9 of these are mine to eat, to reinvest, to take the seeds and replant, to do whatever I need to trade them with somebody. But one of those is God's. It means if I harvest carrots, any carrot fans in the room? If you steam these with some sweet potatoes and mash them all together, ooh, it's like baby food for grown-ups. It's good, okay? All right? If I harvest carrots, it means 9 of the carrots are mine to do with what I need to meet whatever needs that I have. But one of those, the first one, is God's. And so on and so forth. We have all of these things, and I get to keep the big share. I get to manage the big part, and 1/10 of that belongs to God. Now, as they're putting this out, you say, why does God need anything from me? You just said he owns everything. Why does he want a percentage of any of it? In the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in today's church, tithes are an investment in the spiritual health of the community. The tithe, that portion that God said, bring that first part of the harvest. In the Old Testament, they would bring that first part because the priests, the guys who worked in the temple, the guys who would take the scrolls of God's teaching and teach people, here's how to honor God, here's how to grow morally. Their complete sustenance was from the tithe. They didn't own land. They didn't grow crops. They didn't raise cattle. The way that they made a living was from people giving toward that. The way that ministry happened, the way that people would take care of the temple and upkeep that and then fix things and replace things, that was all from the tithe. And so this first portion, this portion that's dedicated back to God, is specifically for spiritual health. It's one of those things where often we talk about, well, God says he needs this, he's taking this from me. He's not taking anything from us. He's given us so much. But what he says is, I want spiritual health to be a priority in your life. I want it to be a priority in the community. Just like we know that physical health is a priority. We know that having safe water to drink is a priority. We know that having peace and safety, we know that having fire protection is a priority. When I pay property taxes, I know that part of that is so our schools and our city departments are funded, and so we can get new water mains on Court Street, so eventually we can repave that. Glory to God. Someday, hopefully. It's coming, okay? But it's an investment in my spiritual health. And you guys, just pile it on, man. Just pile it on, right? It doesn't have to be fancy, right? I'm not super organized, just, okay? The first portion of everything belongs to God, okay? So as we're doing that, here's why I do this, okay? When you come to church and the guy says, we need you to give money, and you're like, dude, I live in Illinois. I already have people taking a cut off the top. Come on. Like, how many cuts can we take before there's nothing left? All right, I understand. If you're visiting from another state, I'm sorry. We like it here. That's not my favorite part. Okay? It's easy to lose sight of that, which is why when I saw this, I said, man, I have to bring this back home and show you guys. Okay? Because when I consider what's on my, thank you guys. Can we give these guys a hand? They did a great job. When I consider how overloaded with stuff my table is, how much that God has blessed me, how abundantly blessed I am, it makes it a little bit easier to say, wait a minute, this is it? This is all you need to do all of the ministry stuff? That this is all that you've asked me to do to invest in the spiritual health of the whole community? It's just this? I think I could probably swing that, right? Because I get to eat all of this. I get to take the seeds from all of this and replant. We found even more. I get to take the seeds from all of this and replant this. It's not a bad deal. It's a good deal. It's a good deal because this stuff is my way of saying, God, you own everything. You gave me all of this. If you said you want me to manage the first percentage back for spiritual health in my community, you got it, man. You got it, dude, right? It's you. This is for you. By the way, let me just take a moment to say, because some of you are like, wow, that's a lot of groceries. Pekin Outreach Initiative, they feed your neighbors every day. They cook hot food and they feed people who have nowhere else to go for food. So tomorrow, instead of just rice and beans and non-perishables, your neighbors are going to eat this abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables. Awesome, okay? And do you know who made this possible? You. When you give, you enable us to do things to invest in our community, to invest in the spiritual health of our community. Okay? So it's important when I look at these two things, when I look at my table, when I look at God's table, and he says, this is what I need you to give, Chris. Then when he asks for something, I understand this is the cut that goes to God, then he deserves, write this down, God deserves your first and your best. God deserves your first and your best. Look again at verse 26. We'll put that up on the screens. God said, bring the very best of the first harvest to me. Okay? He said, I want the best one. If you do sheep, I want the best sheep. If if you raise chickens, I want the best. I don't think they did chickens, but if they did, he would want the best chicken, right? I want the biggest, nicest looking egg. Okay, I want the best one. And you're like, you're the best? Who do you think you are? Oh, wait, you're God. Okay. Of anybody who gets to say, I get the best one, it's him. And if we're being honest, and this is not a guilt trip, it's not a criticism. It's just, let's just look at the reality. This has been me before. This has been you before, okay? I want stuff. I like stuff. I need this stuff to survive. And it's easy for me to say, okay, God needs one. Let's see. You know what? I am hungry. Let's find the smallest one. And let's just breathe that in half. Okay, here's half of one. Here you go. Yes, I did it, Lord. I gave you, right? I mean, sometimes we do that. Sometimes when I give, it's like, dude, I want to. I just need to make sure that I got the bills covered. So, and when I get to the end of the month, whatever is left is yours, Lord. But let's be honest, some months, some months there's more month than money. You ever have those months? Okay? And it's easy to be like, Lord, I love you, but this is kind of a rough month. So I'm just gonna do this. I'll catch up later, I promise. Okay? But it's God's table. It's not Governor Pritzker's table. It's not the city manager's table. It's not the school marching band who, like, don't we pay taxes for the kids to have uniforms? You also need extra? Yes, they do. For marching, okay? It's not their it's God's table. And he said, I want the first and the best. And when I realized God owns everything, Jesus got nailed to the cross for my sins, and he says, Chris, here's a way that you can do something back for me. Give the first and the best to me. I don't want to give him the leftovers. I want to look at my table and I say, Lord, this is what is the best pineapple? This one's kind of, I don't know. This one looks really ripe. Okay. What's the best one? Let me give you the best one because this is your table. Okay. If mom says you have to share G.I. Joes with your little brother, he does not get the first and the best. Okay. You know, if I have to share G.I. Joes with Nikki, he gets the one with the thumbs are already broken off so they can't hold the guns and the rubber band's kind of loose and the paint's coming off of his nose. Here you go, Nikki. Okay, and I'm going to play with the nice ones that I just got for my birthday. Okay, that's how we handle stuff. But this is God's stuff. And when I realize this is the King of Kings, I want to give him the best. So he deserves your first and your best. And I know that that's hard. I know that it's difficult to do. I know that that's a stretch for a lot of us. But it's valuable and it's important. And it's important to look at what he's given me, to look at what he's asked from me. And when I do that, it changes how I feel about giving. It's less like a tax that I have to pay, and it's more like an opportunity for me to say, Lord, I owe everything to you. Is there anything that I can do to give back, to help? Is there any way that I can express thanks? It's an opportunity for me to express that. Write this down in your notes. When it comes to giving, how is just as important as how much. How I give is just as important as how much I give, because we all give things reluctantly. Hands raised. How many of you guys dance for joy when you get your report on your property tax? How many homeowners like, yes, woohoo, right? Ding. How many of you guys, when you get that letter in the mail, it's time to renew your vehicle tags, you're like, I know I did that 3 months ago. How is it time again? It's not exciting. I'm not happy to do it. Let me show you something I read this last week in the Old Testament. Some weird people who got excited about giving. Okay, 1 Chronicles chapter 29. King David really wanted to build a temple for God. He lived in a house. God, the Ark of the Covenant, in that time, God's presence there where they would do sacrifices. The one place they could come and get close to God was a tent. And David lived in a house, and he said, this is not right. We need to build the best building in the world. for God's presence. So he's collecting all of the stuff at the end of his life. He pulls all of the leaders of the nation together. And he says this, 1 Chronicles 29:3. He says, and now, because of my devotion to the temple of my God, I'm giving all of my own private treasures of gold and silver to help in the construction. I'm donating more than 112 tons of gold. Man, that dude was rich. Whoa. Okay. I'm donating 112 tons of gold, 262 tons of refined silver. Now then, who will follow my example and give offerings to the Lord today? Then the family leaders, the leaders of the tribes of Israel, the generals and captains of the army, and the king's administrative officers gave willingly for the construction of the temple of God. They gave about 188 tons of gold, 375 tons of silver, 675 tons of bronze, 3,750 tons of iron. That was a heavy building. Wow. And you think about that. That should sting when you part with that much gold and silver. Okay? These were not just wealthy people. Not all of the leaders had all of the money. Some of these guys didn't have a lot, but everybody chipped in some, and they did it willingly. Consider, David is the king. There was no parliament. There was no Congress. He could do whatever he wanted. He could have said, now listen, you all, I'm giving all of my stuff. You all need to give all of your stuff. He didn't do that. He said, I believe in what we're doing so much. I'm going to make a huge investment personally, but it takes more than what any one person can give. And I challenge you, I inspire you. What can you do to help us do something great for the Lord together? And the pivotal word there is willingly. And that's where we've messed it up so much in church before, is that we make it like a tax in church, or like a requirement. If you want to be a member, it's going to cost you this much in club fees. That's not it at all. God said this in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7. It says, each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And that's our heart. And if you're a regular here, I hope that this is where we're landing on this. Okay? We take tithes and offerings every week. We take time in the service to collect those every week. That should never be a guilt moment. That should never be, if you really love Jesus, that is not a way for you to measure how much you're valuable to God, how much he loves you, how good of a job you're doing. It's an opportunity to do something great. And the willingness part is such a huge deal when we give. That's why it's so important that we understand how much he's blessed us with. And he says, all I'm asking is this piece here. It makes it easier for me to say, you got it, man. What do you need? How can I make it happen? Write this down. When you give willingly, it brings joy. It brings joy. Let's go back to another one of those examples. Paying for gas in the state is expensive. Sometimes it gets more expensive. Okay? I have to drive to get places. I have to pay those things. At the end of the school year, I have 4 kids, right? I get a bill. Here's how much you need to pay. Like, again, didn't I already pay taxes for this? What are we doing with taxes? Okay. I do it. It's not willingly. I'm not excited about it. I don't feel a sense of accomplishment when I pay taxes. I don't feel a sense of accomplishment when I pay school fees. But when Mackenzie is here and saying, God's put this desire in my heart to do something and I can't do it on my own, I need help. And I say, man, I can help. I feel totally differently about it. Same number of dollars. I feel totally different about it. It makes me feel good to think maybe if we all work together, we can help her get there. And that's what happens when we give willingly. It brings joy. Let me read the rest of this passage to you. So David says, I gave a lot. How much can you give? Everybody chips in. Okay, a couple verses later, verse 9, same chapter. Listen to this. The people rejoiced over the offerings. This is what it matters. For they had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. The next day, they brought 1,000 bulls, 1,000 rams, 1,000 male lambs as burnt offerings to the Lord, and they feasted and drank in the Lord's presence with great joy that day. These guys just lost chunks of their net worth. They just parted with things that were hard to come by and precious to them. And they responded to it by throwing this huge party and celebrating like, yes, we gave money. Okay? It's weird. Why? Here's why. Don't miss this. Okay? Because they had an opportunity to be part of something bigger than themselves. They had an opportunity to be part of something great. And as Mark comes back up, here's what I believe. Okay, David did this at the end of his life. He was an old man. It was easy for David to say, I'm giving all the stuff, right? You can't spend it anyway. His son ended up being wealthier than he was. It wasn't a big deal to him. Some of these leaders were probably David's age, but a lot of them were young. They were young men who gave. And here's what's cool. I believe this. The Bible doesn't record this, but I just believe this happened. I believe that some of these men who were in their 20s when they gave, someday later they're walking in Jerusalem with their grandson and they say, hey, look at that. See that there? See the temple? I helped make that. Part of our family, part of your heritage. We contributed to that. Some of the gold that's overlaying the temple, that was ours. We got to be part of making this. Can you believe this? This is the building where God's Spirit is on the planet. This is the most magnificent thing on the face of the earth, and we helped make that a reality. There's a sense of pride. There's a sense of accomplishment. We did something that matters. And it's an awesome opportunity. But I understand, okay, that, and I've said this before plenty of times, that the majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We don't have huge stockpiles of gold to give. If I had the Scrooge McDuck vault, Pastor Chris, I would fund all of the ministry projects. I'll just take on Peak and Outreach Initiative by myself. If we can just get Elon Musk and Bill Gates to come to our church, well, they'll fund everything, right? It's hard. And so for those who are saying, okay, I hear you, and I'm so thrilled that this is what God has given me, but Chris, the reality is, with my Bill's situation and the kids and the stay, okay, and the taxes and all of this other stuff, I can't spare it right now. How am I supposed to respond? You're asking me for stuff that I literally cannot do. Let me give you 3 things as we get ready to wrap up. 3 ways that you can respond if you're in that spot. If you said, man, listen, I hear you and I would love to. I just can't. First thing is this. Write this down. Take a bold step and God will meet you in the middle. Okay? If he said, I want you to return the first portion to me, and you follow that in obedience, I believe that he will meet you in the middle and help. Now, that is not the guy on the stage saying, if you tithe 10%, God will give the bank error in your favor. That may not happen. The majority of people that I've talked to about tithe, and some of those are sitting here, have said, it just always works out. Somehow, when I put him first, at the end of the month, I'm like, I don't know how this worked out, but it just does. Okay? It's not a get-rich scheme. But God says this in 2 Corinthians 9:11. So right after he said, I want a cheerful giver. I'm not twisting anybody's arm. You give what's in your heart to give. But he says this. He said, you will be enriched in every way so that you can always be generous. And that enrichment might be money so that you can give. That enrichment in every way might be causing generosity to grow in your heart. That enrichment might be giving you a sense of enough. And you're like, I'm not sure that I need a new computer anymore. I think I'm happy with the one that I have now. I'm not sure that I need to go on this vacation. I think I can do this because I want to invest in my spiritual health first. So take a bold step. The second one is this. Write this down. Okay? This is controversial. I admit it. Okay? Some pastors would be very critical of me for saying this. This is what I feel in my heart, and I'm just going to say it. Okay? If you're like, bro, I literally cannot. 10%? Are you kidding me? It's impossible. Start somewhere. Start somewhere. I don't believe that God said this and wrote this down in Scripture in order to make this a fine print, beat you over the head with it kind of thing. God's not after your wallet. He's after your heart. He said, Chris, I hear you and I would love to. I literally can't. Start with something. Okay? Imagine if you said, God, I'm going to get my house foreclosed on if I give 10. I can't. Lord, I can't. But I can do this. Then start somewhere. Imagine what's happening when you say, I can do 1. I can start with 1%. I can give you the first and the best 1. I don't believe that when you're there in that moment, God's up there being like, dude, you loser, fail. Somebody strike him with a bolt of lightning. I think God is saying, that's the Spirit. Okay. Make me the first part and let that grow in time, and let that grow as you get a hold of those finances and as you beat the bills back down into submission, right? Let that grow. Start somewhere. Natasha and I started years ago. And we said, okay, the first 10% is God's. We built our budget that way. And that was it. And as through the years, as God has equipped us and blessed us and put thoughts in our heart, we're going above and beyond now. We didn't stay at 10. We said, here's what happened. I said, wait. This is helping people to know who God is. This is helping people to be built up and encouraged. This is helping people to find faith. How much do you need, Lord? Maybe I can do a little more. Wait, I did 1, but I think I can do 2. Can I do 2? I'll do 2. And what happens is when you get that, and with that generosity starts building momentum, you start looking for ways, and you say, where else can I help? Who else needs help? What missionary is coming in next? Boys and Girls Club, what do? They need a new sign? How much does it cost for a new sign? Can we get people together and help them to get a new sign? I want these kids to know that they can make something for themselves and they don't have to drop out of school and get hooked on drugs. I want them to have a successful career in the future. It builds. The last thing to write down is how this all comes together. Write this down. Connect every what to a why. When it comes time to give, whether that's here, whether that's giving to charities in town, whether that's giving to help kids who are hungry on the other side of the world, whether it's giving to help your neighbor who their lawnmower broke and they can't afford to get a new one, and you're like, how much are you short? Maybe I can chip in. Whenever it is, connect every what that you're giving to a why that you're giving it. Because when I consider what God has blessed me with, and I'm not rich by American standards, I am by the world's standards. But something more valuable than rich is having enough. And I want to be able to do more. I want to grow and do more. I would love to give more. But as I do, I remind myself, man, I've been invited by God to build something amazing. I have the opportunity to invest in the people who are investing in my spiritual health. I have the opportunity to help so that my neighbors can eat fresh produce for a change tomorrow. And when I chip in a little bit, and Rick chips in a little bit, and Molly chips in a little bit, and Tom, and everybody just does their part, we can build something amazing together. And that's a reason to celebrate and be excited and have joy. So don't eat God's cut of the cake. Take that first part, even if 10's impossible, Chris. Take 1. Take 1. And start somewhere and say, God, this is a priority in my life. And as you equip me, as you empower me, as you enable me, my heart is to make this a priority and to give to you and to honor you and to give back from all of this abundance that you've blessed me with, because I love you. And I believe as you do that more and more and more, as you give him the first cut, it will bring joy into your life, and together we'll be able to accomplish so much more for God's kingdom and our community. Hey there, just wanted to take a minute to say thanks for watching. If a friend sent you this link, it's because they believe what we talked about today is going to make a positive impact in your life. And if it did, there's probably somebody that you care about who could benefit from it. So take a minute to share this video with somebody. Post it to your timeline or send them a direct link. And if you're able, take a minute to give using the link at the bottom of the description on this video. One last thing. Maybe you feel a tug at your soul and you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual life and form a relationship with God. We've got folks here who would love to talk with you about it. So just text prayer to the number on your screen and we'll follow up with you. It's also in the description on this video in case that helps. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.